I'm going to introduce Krystal. She's a consultant, professional resume writer, and career coach. She's also a senior certified HR professional. She has a background in small business operations, and she's been working with job seekers since 2010, assisting in facets of all job hunting phases, including resume writing, networking, and interview prep. In September 2018, Krystal published her first book, The Insider Guide to Your Dream Career. Krystal holds both the SHRM SCP and SPHR certifications. Those are HR professional certifications. It's very difficult to acquire or to get those, to pass that test. So it's a very distinguished certification. She's also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council and is active in Dallas HR, the work they do there as a member and volunteer. Krystal's presentation today is Closing the Deal, Getting What You're Worth in Your Next Salary Negotiation. It's a highly relevant and important topic for every job seeker. Would everyone please turn their camera on, mute your mics, and welcome Krystal.
Thank you, guys. I'm very happy to be here. This is really a very important topic, and I don't think it gets discussed enough. Although it looks like you guys talk about it regularly. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Technology is not my area of expertise. So, and you know, it's funny because as I was looking at this morning, I didn't have time to change it, but I realized I had a conversation with another expert last week when we were talking about salary negotiation, and they very accurately pointed out to me, it really shouldn't be salary negotiation. We should be talking about compensation negotiation, because it's not just about the dollar point. And we'll dig into that a little bit more as we move forward. We have a relatively small group. If anybody has a question, I encourage you to stick your hand up, just unmute and ask it. I want to cover what matters to you guys. So feel free to jump in. This is for you. This is why we're here. So my first question is, why do we want to negotiate? Why is that important? And the reason it's so important to negotiate, I read studies, I read articles all the time about compensation negotiation, and the numbers vary between 70 and 85%. They're all different. We know this, right? But we know that at least 70% of organizations expect you to negotiate. So if you just take that first offer that they've put on the table and they're expecting you to negotiate, what have you done? You've left money on the table. And I think we've all been guilty of that. Ladies, we tend to be far worse about it than men, but lots of men don't like it either. We live in a society where negotiation is not done. It's rude, it's fill in the blank, whatever our hangups are on doing it. And we've really got to learn to overcome that. If we're not advocating for our careers and for our work, nobody's going to do it for us. And it's really uncomfortable the first few times you do it, but as you get better at it, as you do it more often, it becomes easier and easier. When I first started talking on this topic in Dallas, nobody was doing it. And I was uncomfortable. This is how I learned to become good at negotiating, was by teaching this to job seekers throughout DFW. And it's interesting to me because almost nobody talks about it, and yet it's such a relevant topic. So anyway, I tend to get on my soapbox there, but I really want to encourage you guys to take this seriously, get uncomfortable, and do it when it's time for your next job search or your next job offer. What I'm going to talk you through is not fancy negotiation techniques. There's dozens of really great books out there. One of my favorites is by an ex-FBI negotiator named Chris Voss, called Never Split the Difference. I highly recommend. And really, the more you learn about it, about negotiation in general, the better you're going to get. But what I'm going to teach you is for people who don't do it very often. We're going to talk specifically about your job search. And really, it starts with being prepared. How many people on here have actually done a salary search for your position? Good, good. But I see more hands not going up than I see hands going up. It's gotten easier than ever. Go on Google, Google salary range for filling a general job title, Austin, Texas, because you do want to narrow it. I think we're seeing salaries become a little bit broader now as we have more remote work, but you still want to look at what it's going for in your particular area. I always tell people in Dallas, you know, if we drive an hour north to Oklahoma, we're going to be demanding a whole lot less for the exact same work than we are in DFW. And I'm sure you guys will see the same thing in outlying areas there. So where matters, not as much as what, but where matters. So how do we prepare? We start by doing a little bit of research. Know what your range is. And again, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into all of this. Understand your goals. What's most important to you in this job search? I always like to tell a story. When my daughter was born, I was working at one of those jobs where you had to have a really great excuse to leave on time. Anybody ever had one of those jobs? You know, you worked 60 hours a week, you just did. And the reality was I didn't have enough work to keep me busy. And I had a kid at home that now I wanted to be home. I ended up going to another job when my daughter was about 4 months old. I actually took a pay cut to work from home back when people didn't work from home a day or two a week, to be 15 minutes from the house and to have the expectation of a 40-hour work week. That was what was important to me at that point. And I talk to people all the time who are in changing phases of their life. You know, when we're young, all we want to do is climb that ladder, right? But when we hit a certain point on that ladder, now we start adjusting our priorities. Now we have kids, now we have parents to take care of, now we have other obligations that we're volunteering, and we want the time to do that volunteer work, whatever that looks like. Understand your goals. I always like to say money's only important until it's not. Now it's very important, especially if you're being undervalued, but at some point, almost nobody quits their job because of money. We quit our jobs for lots of other reasons. So know your goals. And then at the end of the negotiation, you have to find a win-win. Okay, this is not a negotiation on purchasing a new car where you want to one-up the other party. This is the start of a relationship that you hope to have for a while. So how can I win, but still win for the organization as well? Maybe I have to give a little bit on this end, but I'm going to pick it back up on this end. How do both sides walk away and feel like they got the best of the situation? Why is this important? If you walk away from a negotiation feeling like you lost, how long are you going to be happy in that role? If you trick your employer into giving you something that they don't feel good about, how long is it going to take them to start pushing you to do more, to replace you, to whatever, fill in that blank? So be real focused on that win-win in this situation, okay? And this is the hard part. And this is the part that almost everybody gets wrong the first time around. And I have a lot of pushback on this, and I have a lot of other experts disagree with me on this, but I steadfastly am going to tell you, avoid the money conversation for as long as possible. If the organization is lowballing their employees, then you got some great experience with the interview process and some great experience gaining the confidence to walk away when it's not the right. And I know that's not ideal. But if the company is offering market value, as they should, and as you're probably going to figure out through other conversations through the interview process, you want to wait as long as possible to have a money conversation. The reason for this, and I'm going to tell you, as an employer, I've been a hiring manager for years. I've been an employer of my own right for almost a decade. And I'm going to tell you, if you walk in, I'm looking to save money. Every money out of my door is money that doesn't go in my pocket. Now I pay all of my employees market rate or better. Okay, I don't want to suggest that, and your employer should do the same. But if we're talking about a $5,000 to $10,000 difference, and you tell me you want that extra $10,000 on our very first conversation, well, I've got 15 other people who didn't tell me that. So I'm moving on with them and I'm moving away from you. If we've had 2 interviews and I'm in love with you and you've got this special skill set and nobody else that I've talked to has it, now I'm starting to go, well, maybe I can stretch my budget a little bit. So avoid the conversation as long as possible. Okay, when it comes up, and the reality is they're asking very, very early. They're often asking in the very first phone call nowadays. And if they do, great. But if the company doesn't bring it up, you don't either. So when they ask, acknowledge the question, deflect the answer, and then ask them their range. And that's going to go something like, I understand why you're asking me my salary range this early, but I don't really know enough about the position yet to give you a valid number. I'd really love to know what your range is, and I'd be happy to tell you if that's a good fit for me or not. Okay, you were polite, but you failed to answer. Now, the reality is they're more experienced in this conversation than you are. If they persist, you're gonna have to be ready to answer it. And that's another conversation I have that a lot of experts will tell you, don't ever answer them. He who speaks first loses. Not if everybody's doing it right. And by the way, if you're feeling that the company's taking advantage of you, you shouldn't be interviewing with them. So do try to get them to talk first, but be prepared to answer. Okay, let's talk about some specific examples. What were you making at your last job? I hate this question because I don't think it's a fair question. There's a lot of inexperienced interviewers. First of all, and I talk about this when I do interview prep as well, but always assume the best of your interviewer. If they've given you enough signals that you can't, walk away. Okay, you do not need to be there. If you already feel taken advantage of, walk away. So we're always going to assume the best until they give us a reason not to. We're going to assume when they're asking us, what were you making at your last job? They're not thinking through their answer or their question. And we're going to say, you know what, that amount actually isn't relevant to this position, but I'd love to hear what your range is. Maybe my last job was working at a cashier at Target while I was looking for something full time. And I was making $15 an hour. But what I ought to be making is between 80 and 95 at my next job. Am I going to tell them, oh, my last job was $15 an hour? No, and it's really, truly not relevant. Maybe it was similar, but again, you don't know a whole lot about this position yet, in theory, and it's not going to be identical. So what you were making at your last job is never anybody's business. There's actually some states that have made that question illegal. It is still legal here in Texas, so don't get mad if somebody asks. Again, we're going to assume the best. We're going to assume it was a misspeak. We're going to respond this way. And if they don't want to tell you their range, then you still don't have to tell them what you were making at your last job. You can say, I think what you're really looking for is the range that I'm looking for now, and that is X. Okay, are we good? Questions at this point? Now, one of my least favorite questions is, what's the least amount of money you'll take to take this job? And this, again, you gotta hope is a misspeak. My favorite answer to that is, what's the least amount of work I can do and still work here? I know it's sassy, it's could be construed as rude, but that interviewer is going to do one of two things. They're going to go, okay, that was a bad question, and they're going to correct. Or they're going to tell you through words or actions that you need to run away because all they're concerned about is paying you the least amount of money possible. Okay, we're all trying to manage our budgets, but when we take care of our employees, they take care of us. So you know, again, and I'm a huge proponent of, sometimes we have to do what we have to do, okay? And I don't want to speak, I don't know what any of your circumstances are, and I don't want to speak to that, but I'm a huge proponent, and I'll get to you in just a second, Carolyn, of not taking a job just to take a job. Make sure that you are taking the right position. Otherwise, you're going to be right back at it in 3 months, and what's the point of that? Carolyn, you had a question. You're on mute.
I just wanted to ask you your, what was that response you said a few moments ago? If someone says, what's the least amount of money you'll take for this job? What was your comment?
What's the least amount of work I can do? I have a
Okay.
job here.
That's good. Okay, thank you.
Well, and it is, it's a smart, pardon my French, it's a smart ass answer, right? But it's a very good way to rein that back in.
Right.
And I
to get
have
them to
been
think.
asked that before and had the interviewer go, oh, that's not what I meant. I'm so sorry. And we got right back on track, right?
Yes, thank
I
you.
have had clients use that before and promptly in the interview, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? Okay, we're gonna move on. The correct answer, or excuse me, the correct question is, what are your salary expectations? Whatever point of the process they're asking this at. And your answer is going to be very similar to the last one. And that's, I don't really know enough about this position yet, but I'd love to know what range you're offering. Okay. And this is something you may have to practice saying for a little while until it rolls naturally off your tongue. But once you do, you're going to be a lot happier with it. And like I said, sometimes they're not going to answer you, but sometimes they will. And it's going to make the process a lot easier. Now, this is where I inevitably get the question, what do I do when it's on the application and I can't move forward without putting a number on the application? And the answer to that is, we're going to talk about 3 numbers that you're going to come up with. Okay, you're going to come up with a high and a low and a budget number, and we'll touch on those in just a second. You're going to put the lowest number you would reasonably accept if all the stars aligned. Okay, you're not committing yourself to anything, but if they're putting it this early in the process, they're using it as a screening tool. So don't screen yourself out. Don't put less than you'd be willing to take. But what we don't consider when we put these numbers down is what do the benefits look like, right? How much am I paying in medical benefits? My ex-husband he took early retirement at Verizon several years ago, moved into a smaller company and called me. I'm still his go-to for insurance. And he's like, they're taking advantage of me. And I look at it and I said, no, they're just not Verizon. They just don't have, you know, they don't have access to the same things. So you have to consider things like that, right? Where at Verizon, he paid $300 for a family. At this new job, he's paying $500 for just him and our daughter. It's different. And it's not as good of insurance. It is what it is. But you have to look at that as part of the overall package. Okay, and medical is the easy one. But there are lots of other things that come into play there as well. Okay, so first thing we have to do this, and so many people skip this process. Figure out what you're worth. Okay, I touched on this. Google salary range for job title in Austin, Texas, and you're going to come up with some really great numbers. But you can also go to specific sites, and I'm an advocate of going to at least 3. Okay. You can't just go to one and go, this is it, because every different website has a slightly different location. I like salary.com because it has a tendency to break down job titles. And I think that can be very, very helpful. I always like to choose administrative positions. And administrative assistant can be an $8 an hour receptionist. An administrative assistant can also be a 6-figure executive admin. Am I going to put $8 to $60 an hour. I'm like, no, that's not reasonable. I'm well above the $8, but I'm not quite at the $60 either. So salary.com will break down to more specific job titles that you can then search on and get a little bit more accurate information. Glassdoor is a really good one because that is employee reported information. So if you're looking at a specific, especially larger companies, small ones, you're not going to get a lot of traction on, but larger companies, you can actually figure out what are they paying in this area. LinkedIn, if you have the premium subscription, you can get salary information and they'll break it down by region as well. And then there are tons of other ones as well. If you belong to a professional trade association, for example, belong to Dallas HR, I can go into their offices and I can get a salary survey for the DFW area for HR professionals. How great is that? And mine doesn't charge for that. Some do, some don't, but it's really good information when you can get it. And I haven't added it on to this. This is the second time I've talked about it and forgotten to add it on, but the state of Texas TWC website actually has started putting out quarterly salary reports. So there are lots and lots of places to go look. You have no excuse for not doing the work. And I love this quote, and I want everybody here to take a minute and digest this. If you don't know your own value, somebody will tell you your value, and it will be less than your worth. How many times have you taken a job only to find out you're making $15,000 less than the person you just replaced who stunk at the job? Been there, done that, and a lot of people have. Don't be that person. It's a lot harder to get a raise once you're inside of an organization than it is to get what you're worth when you're making that move. Okay, we've done our research. We know what the range is. It's huge. Now we've got to figure out where we fit inside of the range. I want you guys to come up with 3 numbers while you're doing your research. First one is a budget. We should all have budgets all the time. We should especially have budgets when we're job seeking. If you don't, now's a great time to do it, okay? And this budget that you're putting together, if you have a partner, by all means, pull that works as well. If you're a 2-income household, by all means, include that. But I don't want you to do that. I'm out of work. We're eating ramen noodles and grilled cheese sandwiches budget. I want you to do we like to go to the movies every Friday and buy the large popcorn budget, okay? What do you need to live your life? We put 6% into the 401k. We like to take a vacation every year. I want you to do a reasonable, we can live with this long-term budget. What is the minimum you can afford to take, okay? The second number, what is the minimum I should be reasonably offered? Hopefully, this number comes in above your budget. But if it's close, this is why you need both numbers. If it's relatively close and you get offered that number, it's your dream job, it's perfect, everything aligns, it's 35 hours a week, it's 4 days, it's flexible, it's everything you could have ever dreamed of, but it's just lower than the minimum you can afford to take, what's gonna happen? About 6 weeks in, you're going to realize this is not a good fit for you because you can't pay your mortgage. So you have to have both those numbers, okay? If that minimum number, what should you reasonably offer, comes below your budget, talk to one of those financial planners, okay? That's a whole different conversation, and it's one that I'm not really equipped to have with you. So that's what our financial planners are there for, is to help us create a better budget so we fall in. Figuring out that minimum number and your maximum number, what's the most I can reasonably ask for? It's kind of an art form. It's based on your year's experience, how closely you fit the jobs, and it's probably going to be somewhat broad in the beginning, and that's okay. You'll narrow it as you learn more about each position, okay? Questions at this point? I know some of this is dry, but this is such important stuff. And if you struggle with this, Get a career coach. They'll help you through it. The minimum and maximum, this is what we're good at. If you have a friend that's in HR, this is what we're good at. If you've got a recruiter that you trust, this is what we're good at. They can help you come up with these numbers. But if you come up with these numbers before you get to that negotiation stage, it's a lot easier to have these conversations. Okay. This is what we started talking about. It's not just salary, it's total compensation. To start narrowing those numbers, you want to look at what else comes into play. First of all, what are the position expectations? Are you using all of my skills or very few of my skills? Are you looking for 60 hours a week? Or are you looking for 35 hours a week? Are you going to stretch me and grow me and help me get to the next step? Or is this just a drudge job where I come in, do what I got to do, and go home with no opportunity for growth or learning? What's the company culture? There's no such thing as the right company culture, but there is the right company culture for you. I come out of small organizations. I like companies where we do things after work, everybody's friendly, everybody knows what's going on in everybody's lives. When I started coaching, I learned that not everybody does that. Really? There are certain people that want to go to work, do their job, come home, don't want to talk to anybody about personal things, don't want to share their personal life. Still have a hard time wrapping my head around it, but there are just as many of those people out there. There are people like me. And there's nothing wrong with that, unless you choose to go to work for the wrong culture. So know what is important to you. And then there's benefits. And there's two types of benefits. There's tangible benefits and there's intangible benefits. Tangible benefits have a dollar amount associated with them. They're the ones that we tend to think of, like medical, dental, vision, PTO. Intangible benefits don't have a dollar value associated with them. And there's things that are becoming more important to us, like flexibility, remote work, those sorts of things. I think we have a question here. Nope, thank you. What's important to you? Okay, that's going to be different for every single person on here. But you have to know what matters. And sometimes getting what you want is easier than you think if you just know enough to ask for it. So spend some time. When I work with clients, we sit down and we do an exercise. I call it the dream job wish list. And it's really tell them, sit down, and if you could create the perfect job, what does it look like? And we talk only not about the position, but culture, benefits, travel, location, that sort of thing. And if you've thought that out ahead of time, it becomes much easier to pull that in when you're at this stage. So we're having a conversation, we're about $3,000 off, we can't quite come together. And I say, well, you know, it's a long drive and, you know, rush hour is a mess. How about I come in an hour early and leave an hour early? And I'd be okay with that. And they go, sure, why not? And now everybody's happy. We found the win-win. Okay. Or an hour late. I have a girlfriend who can't make it anywhere on time to save her life. It's a running joke. But when she changes jobs, it always becomes an issue for her until she gets settled in. She's so good at what she does, and she's in a specialty industry, so she can get away with it. But that's one of the things that she has learned to negotiate. Look, I'm not going to be there at 8. I have to tell you, it's not going to happen. Let me come in at 9, and, you know, and she makes it work. So what's important to you? Okay, what are we considering through the course of our negotiation? Are you currently working? Right, wrong, indifferent, fair, not fair? I don't think it's ever not going to be a thing. If you're working, you've got more negotiating power. But let me make this clear. Some of that is because of you, our mindsets. When we're working, we're a lot more willing to stand up and not bend, right? We're a lot more willing to go, hey, you know, it's not that important to me. Whereas when we're not working, we're like, I'm going to take it anyway. We're a lot more willing to compromise. So bear that in mind. But, you know, let's face it, recruiters too are more willing to fight for us when they know that we're currently working. How close a fit are you? Are you chasing them and begging them for the opportunity to learn these skills, or do you have them all? The health of the company. This has become a really big thing over the past couple of years, right? You know, as companies shift and adjust, and you know, I have clients in the restaurant industry, and I've watched a lot of up and down over the last 2 years, right? A year and a half ago, most of the leadership were taking pay cuts. A lot of people were losing their jobs, but we're swinging back around to where now they can make, they can negotiate for those higher salaries again. So I say health of the company, but health of the industry is important too. You can't ask for what's not there, and you have to understand that. You know, can the company afford to negotiate, and what pieces can they afford to negotiate? Some large organizations are given a pay band, and this is what it is. This is it. So no, I can't go above that. But maybe, even though I can't go above that, maybe I can give you a hiring bonus. Maybe I can give you a performance bonus. There's options, right? So what is negotiable and what isn't? Benefits, we touched on. And then who's chasing who? You know, if they reached out to you and they've been pursuing you this entire time, you better believe you're in a position to ask for the higher level. If you have been trying to get your foot in this company for 3 years and you've been chasing them, you may want to take a little bit lower to get your foot in the door and move forward. So a lot of this is an art form. Okay, a lot of this takes a lot of self-examination. But if you put the time into it, and this is where people fail. We've all got the capability of doing this, but we don't. Just like we don't practice for our interviews. You know, we show up, we get asked the same question every time. We're like, I don't know. We do the same thing here. We don't think it. We don't do our research. We don't think ahead. And you notice I haven't talked about any negotiation techniques yet, right? I haven't talked about any tricks of the trade. Talked about doing your research and knowing what you want and knowing what's important to you. Because tricks don't work. Now, there is one psychological action that I've seen work more than once. Doesn't work every time, but this is body language and the psychology of working with people. And that is when an offer is made to you. This really only works on the phone or in person. It doesn't work when an offer is made electronically. But when a number's thrown out at you, you repeat it and you shut your mouth. And you count to at least 15 in your head and you don't say a word. What happens when people get quiet?
Uncomfortable.
That's right. We have this psychological need to fill the gap, right? So sometimes that will encourage, if they are waiting with another number, that will encourage them to do it. I have this really great story of a friend, and years ago, she and I talked through, she'd gotten an offer. She's so excited about this job. She's like, we're gonna go, I'm going in, we're negotiating. What do I do? And I talked to her about this. She's like, okay, I'm gonna do it. She gets in, they actually offered her about $20,000 more than she expected. She got really excited. She went, this amount? And she's just like sitting there processing it, just so excited and so thrilled. She had no intention of negotiating at this point. Do you know they came back with another 10 grand? Now, it's not gonna happen every time. Again, this is why tricks don't work, but it never hurts to use psychology against other people either. So that's the only trick that I advocate. Other than that, practice, be prepared. It's really that simple. And I guarantee you, if that company is hiring 20 people, 16 of them have no idea what the market value is for that job. They've done nothing. They're going to ask for money. If they negotiate, they're going to ask based on what they made at their last job. Which brings me to one other thing. You never ever say, I need to make. Well, my bills are, so I need. This is not about need. This is about value. Okay, and this is another hard one, and I will work with, and this is something else you have to practice. I work with people, and inevitably the first time they come back and they go, I told them I needed X, and they said no. And I'm like, okay. Next time you go in and you say, well, you know, I've done some research, and the market value that I came up with was X to Y based on my years of experience. I'm asking for Z. And now you have data. Facts are always easier to discuss. And when they go, oh no, we're offering $25,000 less than that, then you can kindly look at them and go, okay, I'm sure you're far more experienced at salary negotiation than I am. I would love to see where your numbers come from, or at salary research than I am. I would love to see where your numbers. You're not arguing about, you know, you're not arguing want, need. It's not personal. Let's talk about market rate. Explain to me why you're not paying market rate. And they may say, boy, is this a small company? We just don't have it, but we make up for it in XYZ. And you can go, oh, well, you know, that works for me. Or you can go, I'm sorry, I can't possibly take a job for that. But you've got control of the situation now. Keep it professional, keep it unemotional, keep it fact-based. They can't get mad at you. You can't get mad at them. It makes the conversation so much easier. You guys remember what I said at the very beginning? This is not, I completely lost my train of thought. This is fact-based. This is not about want. This is not about need. Okay. I know. This is not about one-upping. If we can't expect the best out of the person we're having this conversation with, we probably shouldn't be having this conversation with them. Let me tell you a little trick about recruiters. I have a lot of conversations with this recruiter, this third-party recruiters trying to lowball me. They want you to make as much money as possible. Do you know how recruiters get paid? Recruiters get paid a percentage of your salary. So if they can get you $15,000 more, they're going to get a little bit more money too. Now, internal recruiters, that's a different conversation. They've got a budget that they're working with. Okay. But you either trust the person that you're having the conversation with or you move on. We always assume the worst until we just can't. I'm not suggesting you be naive. I'm not suggesting you take things at face value. Do your research, know what you're getting into. But if you legitimately can't, and a lot of job seekers, look, this is a hard process. It's difficult. It's a beat down. There's nothing fun about looking for a new job. But if you walk into these conversations with a chip on your shoulder, sure that everybody's out to get you, your job search is going to last a whole lot longer. I have a lot of conversations with people. I can't get a job because I'm a woman in a man's industry, because of my skin color, because of my age. Age is the big one that I see. And do you know what it really is? It's because of that chip on their shoulder. It's because if you think you, Henry Ford, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Okay. I firmly, truly believe that you're walking in, they're seeing something, they're seeing that defensiveness, they don't know you and they don't have time to dig through that. Okay, so you come in with the best of intentions, with a great attitude. I once worked with a 78-year-old man. His industry turnaround time for a job was about 9 months. We had him landed in 2.5. You know why? Because he didn't come to me asking me, how do I get a job? He came into me and said, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to get one quickly. Help me do the right things. And he did everything he was supposed to do. He is one of my favorite stories. He had the best attitude. You couldn't help but like him. And so how do you think those recruiters saw it, right? So soapbox, stepping off of it, but this is important stuff. So what do? We have to know where we stand. We start by asking the recruiter for their range after they bring it up. We understand our leverage and where it ends. We know when not to negotiate, okay? That's few and far between, but there are gonna be times when it just doesn't make sense, okay? And just use some emotional intelligence here. And, you know, one of the best examples I can give, again, we're all a little bit beyond this, but I'm not going to go down to Target and go, no, I'm worth at least $30 an hour to work the checkout. I might be, but that job isn't, right? So if you're taking a step backwards, if you're doing something different, it's few and far between. There's almost always wiggle room, but know when not to. And then my final piece of advice is get it in writing, especially when you work out some sort of a deal. This is important because misunderstandings happen and people leave jobs. So you negotiate with the department manager a $2,000 hiring bonus after you've been there for 3 months. And then 6 weeks in, they leave. And then, you know, you go to HR when the time comes and they go, what are you talking about? If you have it in writing, there's no misunderstanding. Okay. And that's best case scenario. Again, we're going to assume the best of everybody. If a company makes you a bunch of big promises and refuses to put it in writing, you have to ask why. I'm not saying there is no good reason. I don't know what that might be. I have yet to come across one. And it doesn't have to be, most companies are going to give you a formal written offer letter once you've negotiated. It might not be right up front. And I've had some people push back and go, well, they didn't put it in writing the first time. Well, that's almost a definite indicator that they were expecting to negotiate. They'll put it together once you come to a decision together. But even an informal email saying, we're so excited to have you, here's the numbers. Here's what we've agreed on. Get it in writing. So what are we going to do? We're going to know our market value. We're going to research the company. We didn't really talk a lot about that. That's part of the interview process, but know the organization, okay? Glassdoor, just a general Google search. If they're a public company, research the company. Get a salary range when you can. And in my expert opinion, you're going to avoid that money conversation for as long as you can. Questions?
Krystal, thank you. This is, first of all, it's just amazing. Secondly, we've had another person over the years, Charles Black. He's now with Indeed. He's always been just a real hard-nosed salary negotiation guy. And when it came to, like, you have to put something in that space on the application, he said he would just put zeros. So I don't know what your recommendation is, you know, just to be able to get the application to submit.
If it will let you put zeros, but the companies that really want this information have gotten to where you can't do that.
Ah, so what is your recommendation?
I put the lowest number possible. If you can put a range, put that range in, but if you just, what I'm saying more and more often is you've got to put one number in. It's not going to let you put a 1. It's not going to let you put a 0. So you put, you know, you've done your research and you put the lowest number. And then you'd be prepared to ask for more once you get further into the process.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a hard one. And I've seen that shift over the years. We actually did a Q&A with a number of recruiters. And of course, this question comes up every year that we do this. And the last several years, that seems to be, you know, that everybody seems to be in agreement on that. So I'm going to stand behind. We used to give slightly different advice. I'm going to stand behind that one.
The bots are getting smarter.
They are, and it's an unfortunate way to do things, but it is what it is. You know, as a hiring manager, I can just tell you horror stories about applicants. You know, I get 150 applicants that, you know, 140 of them don't even remotely have the job skills. As an applicant, you know, I know that you're struggling with the exact opposite. I applied to 50 positions and 3 of them had the decency to respond to me. It's a broken system, right? And all we can do is the best that we can do and try to do it right ourselves.
Krystal, I have a question.
Yes.
Krystal, a few moments ago, you said when an offer is made, repeat it and then wait 15 seconds or 10 seconds. What comes next after you are silent, after you repeat it?
Well, you're waiting for them to say something.
Okay.
And sometimes they're going to go, yeah, that's what I offered you. But sometimes the psychology kicks in, and if they already are authorized to go higher, sometimes they're going to go higher.
Okay.
People don't like silence.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Oh, y'all have no questions at all. Everybody's ready to just get their highest salary possible. Good for you.
We see this on the we see this on the online ones. For some reason, people get a little shy. James, you had something.
Yes, I do. I'm curious about your book, Krystal. I didn't have an opportunity to look at what it's about. Could you share that?
Sure. So it is the best practices of job searching from that wish list that I talked about, all the way through what do you do after you land. I think there's a lot of bad advice out there. This it's best practices with explanations around when it will and when it won't work. So.
Okay. And when you say when it will land, what do you mean by that?
Well, once you've made an offer, right? We quit talking about the job search, but once we've got an offer, it's time to give our notice if we're still working. It's time to figure out what our next steps are, gather the right information from our old employer, set ourselves up in the new employer.
I gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's on Amazon if anybody's interested. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, my name's Kathy. These days, even if you've done a great deal of research on what companies are paying and what your value is, the rapidly rising inflation often makes the information obsolete in real time. So how would you suggest that someone put a value on their ability based on that?
Well, you've got to tie that in. So, and actually that's a very timely question because we've seen almost 8% inflation. We've also seen people took job cuts 2 years ago, and now we're seeing people at 10, 15, 20% above where they were before because of job changes. Some of it's just doing the research and being aware. Some of it is looking at, okay, I did my research. This, you know, they're telling me 50 to 60. I know inflation's at this. I'm going to ask for a minimum of 65. So some of it is just, what are you comfortable with? What makes sense? And then be prepared to have an open conversation with that recruiter, hiring manager when you get there. You know, what does their range look like? What are they capable of? There's no right answer for that, unfortunately. But so many people don't even do that initial research that they just don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult because obviously the company's done its own research, and very often they've come up with salary guidelines based on the data that they had at the beginning of the fiscal year, and that's all bonkers now as well. So both sides are having a hard time, I would imagine, keeping up with what they can pay and what the job seeker's value is.
They are, but I have never seen a job market this volatile.
Mhm,
So right now
exactly.
that is a very, very timely, it makes a whole lot of sense. But 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we know what the last few years have looked like. Before the pandemic, it was not, it never veered that much. Right? I mean, so I think if we can make it through this, this will cease to be as big of an issue as it is. You know, the good
Right.
news is, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, and so if you're able, the last statistic I saw said that salaries have gone up in some areas by 5%, where the cost of living has gone up by 8%. And so it's negated all of that. But if you are able to negotiate a higher salary because of inflation, and then all of a sudden it dips again into a recession, and so it's what you've negotiated is perhaps not going to be possible by the company. So it's really a really difficult market, I think, right now to negotiate.
It is, but I think we got lazy, and I think there's still a little bit of room to go, right? It's still okay. You ask, you have the full conversation, right? You don't dig your heels in and be stubborn about it. But if you get that now, one of the statistics that I haven't seen change significantly, we get what, 3 to 5% raise when we stay in one place, 3 to 5% cost of living every year. We get on average about a 15% raise when we move organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you like where you're at, and this is a whole nother conversation, but if you like where you're at, instead of jumping, you start by going to that employer and say, I don't want to go. But if I start looking, I've done my research and I'm confident I can make 15, 18% more than I'm making now. Really like to talk about how I can get an increase here so I can stay put.
Right. And with the market this tight, I don't think there's ever been a better time to negotiate than there is today.
And we're seeing a lot more norm around employers going, oh, I just had to hire somebody in at 10% higher than everybody else. We're going to bump everybody else up instead of punishing those long-term employees for staying put. So I think that's been a really positive move forward in the job market. You know, we're actively going, let me make sure that everybody's paid, you know, fairly. And I hate the word fairly when it comes to salary, because there's not really any such thing, but you get what I'm saying there.
I have another question, Krystal. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shannon.
Oh, no, I was just going to agree with her that the best thing to do is to make sure you do your research. Go out there and look at all those different compensation websites. And that way you kind of feel armed and ready when you walk in. And if they are way below those market rates, then you might need doing some education to them. Really.
And I've seen that happen too. It doesn't happen often. Usually there are reasons companies are underpaying, but sometimes you present them with, look, here's what I've come up with. And it forces them to go back around and take a look at what they've been doing. So
Krystal, I had a question regarding the entire compensation package. What types of benefits do you believe are likely to be negotiable?
medical is not. They have what they have, and there's so many regulations around that. And I think people need to hear that. I think people don't always realize that. What tends to be negotiable, hiring bonuses, longevity bonuses, any type of bonus, really. PTO, training is a huge one that people don't think about, but we all need. I belong to a professional organization. Now, granted, I own my company. There's nobody paying for my stuff, but that's, as a small business, I can't provide good benefits. We provide training. We pay for professional organizations. We pay for certifications. One of my frustrations with my certification, you know, my last job working for somebody else, I had to take PTO and pay for all my own credit hours. Yeah, and that gets expensive, and So, maybe I should have negotiated, you're going to pay for my professional association and you're going to pay for my time out to go to my conference. You're going to pay for these classes. Most companies have training budgets. So it's, maybe it's the flexibility. I think you have to be, the whole remote work thing has become huge. Companies are either doing it or they're not. If you're in a company and you've been in a company, you've got some bandwidth there. You're not going to come into a new company and say, hey, I know that it's an in-house position, but I want it remote. That's not going to work. But what might work, and what I think most people really want, instead, it's not really the remote work, it's the flexibility. Okay, it's I'm going to work these core hours, but I need to go home on Tuesday to let the pest control people in. I need to leave on Friday for my kids' graduation. Right? I'm producing, I'm doing what I'm being paid for. Treat me like an adult. And so figure out what that looks like for you. And it's those intangible benefits that tend to be the easiest to negotiate. And it tends to be the ones we forget about the most. Did that help?
Thank you. Yes.
Krystal, I'd like to ask one more thing, please.
Yes.
Last week I had an interview, and the interview was with the CEO and the VP, the HR vice president. And at the end of the interview, the CEO asked me what he could do to support me. Is that an opportunity? What did that mean? Is that an opportunity to say, well, I would like to learn more about this, so I would like to get this certification, but what does that say? I was a little dumbfounded about that.
That's a great question, and it's not one you hear often. It means that the company is very employee focused, people focused, which is a good thing. And really, I think it's exactly what it sounded like. It's hard to know for sure, right? We're all different, but it really sounded like, what's going to make you happy in this position?
Okay.
Is it education, professional growth?
Okay. Yeah. Well, if I had said, excuse me, if I had said something like, well, I would like to learn more advanced skills in one of the tools that they use. Would that make them feel like that I was not very good at using that tool? Like I'd like to have advanced Excel skills. I'd like to have advanced skills in using Google Earth or whatever the case might be, that are tools that they use in their business every day. Would that show a weakness on my part or anything like that?
At that level, so first interview, maybe not, but at that level, I mean, you're already talking to the CEO. I assume that's second, third interview at that point.
No, that was actually the first interview, but this has gone through an executive search firm first, and then that meeting.
So you've probably already established yourself as competent at this stage. So no.
Okay.
I guess my specific answer is look at where you're at in the process. But the CEO isn't going to be talking to you. He's got better things to do than talk to somebody who's doesn't appear to already meet the minimum, right?
Okay. Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Don't overthink it, and that's a great question. And don't overthink it. We tend to do that in a lot of stages of the interview process. We try to break down what they mean, what they're saying, again, take them at their word. We're looking for a good fit. I like to compare interviewing to dating. Yes, we're all on our best behavior, but if we have to fake who we are through the dating process, being married is going to be miserable. So, be as open and honest and assume that they're doing the same.
Okay.
And be you. Be the best you, but be you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? This is such a good topic.
This was a great topic. So folks, you have a little bit more time to ask questions. This is a really important topic. So if you have any questions about anything Krystal offered, I'm sure she charges over $100 to have questions answered when you work with her. So take this opportunity now to, don't be shy, come on.
And if you have a question that you're not comfortable asking, my email's up here on the screen. Make sure you tell me where you saw me, so I know it's one of these groups. I'm happy to answer quick questions if you've got something that you're just not comfortable asking in front of the group.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask one more question then. During that same interview that I mentioned to you, I noticed that there are several family members that have important positions in that company. I thought that perhaps one of the things I would like to know is more about what they do in the company, trying to learn a little bit more about the culture, because I expected that could be very difficult for me, especially since they are from a different descent. And so when the CEO asked me if I had any other questions, I said, what do you do for the company? Because he had other people that were family members that were in similar positions. One was the COO, and it was obvious that they held high positions in the company. So I asked the CEO what he contributed to the company. And the reason why I did that was to find out if he's the financial guy, if he's the, what his focus is.
Mm-hmm.
So I would kind of know, okay, well, what's my relationship going to be with this man or with this CEO if I go to work for the company? And that may have been brash, but I just wanted to find out, who I'd be dealing with in the company and what their areas are. And then he told me, he said, this is what I did yesterday. This is what I do today. And this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. And I thought that was interesting because he told me when he did that, he told me the history of the company. He said, in other words, this is where we started. This is where we made some mistakes. This is what we're doing today. We're growing today. And tomorrow, I want to be able to step out and let the employees run the company. That was the tomorrow.
So I'm hearing transparency from him, which is a good thing.
Yes. Me too. Okay.
There's no such thing as a bad question.
Okay.
There are always weird interviewers who are like, oh my gosh, that woman showed up with no pantyhose on. Okay, it's Texas.
Yeah.
And if that's a problem, I don't want to work for you, right? There's always, but you can't worry about those people. Again, we're going to assume the best.
Okay.
And if it's not a fit, it's not a fit, right? If I show up to an interview in a dress with no pantyhose and they don't like me, that's okay, because I'm not going to be happy there. So ask your questions. Guide the conversation in whatever direction makes sense to you. I mean, again, like I said, this is dating, right? This is getting to know, are we going to be a good fit together?
Okay.
And you need to be asking, and this is a mistake a lot of job seekers make. We're so eager to answer their questions and impress them, we forget to ask our own and make our own judgments, right?
Okay.
But you can walk away from this process at any point you want to.
Well, and I asked that question knowing what that culture, that man's culture, knowing what they're typically like after working with some people from that culture before, made me want to kind of learn a little bit more about who I'd be dealing with, because I have had exposure to that culture before and I know how they operate. So that was important to me. And I did it with respect.
As you should, but you absolutely should ask those questions. And if they're offended, well, then you need to take that as part of their response, part of your decision making. Ahmed, did I see a hand go up?
Yes. So I just want to thank you, Krystal, for this information. I just have a quick question that you can share with us. When did you decide to transition to have your own ABR HR business? Because I know you've been working in the HR and in the personal and professional development for many years as a manager and directors maybe. Then how did you decide to go? And I know you had people reporting to you and you have offices, you have clients, and you're busy, you have your own schedule. Tell us more about that. That's pretty interesting.
So I've been in small businesses most of my career, most 15 and under employees. So I had the privilege of operating the last two companies I worked for absentee owners. And I left my last one. We had a disagreement about some operational things. I wanted to do one thing, he wanted to do another. I said, it's your company. And I walked away, and bless his heart, my ex-husband, my husband at the time, said, why do you keep making money for other people? Go make money for you. And I said, I'm in HR, I can't do that. But I did some research. I'm very, very lucky. I made all my mistakes with other people's money. I've made my own with mine too. But, I hit a point where my daughter was going into kindergarten at the time. I was ready to make my own decisions, do my own things, and say no when I didn't want to work with certain people. And I don't ever recommend anybody do what I did. It was the absolute wrong way to go about it. But I've been lucky. I've landed on my feet. I've grown a very nice small company over the past few years.